www.videonews.com.
Welcome to the Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan. My name is Michael Penn. I'm the Vice President of the club, and I will be your moderator for today. We have a very special guest today, one who I personally am very interested to hear what he has to say today. He needs little introduction. Most of you have gathered here because you know exactly who he is. He is the former Prime Minister, Yukio Hatoyama, and he was Prime Minister. He came into power in a landslide election, which was held, as I recall, August 30th of 2009. And he was Prime Minister for, what was it, 8 or 9 months?
8 months.
8 months. And then in the beginning of June of 2010, he stepped down after a very short, controversial, but exciting premiership. And after him, there followed 2 more prime ministers of the Democratic Party of Japan until December of 2012, when the long-ruling Liberal Democratic Party came back into power under Shinzo Abe. So we're going to have him reflect on where things stand now. And what he is doing now, in case you're wondering, is he is the president of his own institute, which is called the East Asian Community Institute. And you may remember, East Asia Community was one of the slogans, one of the issues which he promoted very strongly during his premiership. He believed that Japan should work very hard to have positive and constructive relations with its Asian neighbors, South Korea and China. It seems to be a somewhat different spirit than exists in the current policies. And if you see, in fact, he's been publishing books through his institute and through other publishers. Here's a number of pamphlets on various issues that have been published through his own institute about the East Asia community and the future of Okinawa, for example. Here's one about Korea and North Korea, the Henoko base issue, and of course, one of the other issues that we're probably going to hear a lot about today, the Ukraine issue and Japan-Russia relations. And very shortly, he has another book coming out, which is about, again, the East Asia community and why the concept remains relevant to the Japanese situation today. So first, he'll have a speech of about 25 or 30 minutes. He'll be speaking in Japanese, even though his English is quite good. And our interpreter, of course, will be Ms. Takamatsu, our all-time pro. And I'll hand it over to former Prime Minister Hatoyama. Please, they're yours.
Thank you. マイケル・ペンさんにご紹介をいただきました鳩山でございます。久しぶりにカメラの法律をいただきまして、何か政治家に戻ったような錯覚を覚えております。今日は私が総理大臣時代に、大変秘書官としてお世話になりました佐野さんもお見えいただいておりますし、また同志として活躍していただいていました亀井明子さんもいらっしゃいますので、いろいろと思い出が尽きないものはございますが、今日私がこちらにお招きをくださったのは、なぜクリミアに行ったんだお前みたいな話だと思っておりますので、今日はその話をまずメインにお話を申し上げながら、後で総理時代の事柄など、あるいは普天間の問題など、皆様方にお話しさせていただく機会があればと思っております。座ってお話をさせていただきます。
So thank you very much. I've just been introduced. I am Yukio Hatayama, and it has been a while since I've been able to be in front of so many cameras. I have a slight, almost feeling of deja vu, as though I have become a politician again. I see many people, familiar people in the audience, familiar faces in the audience. Mr. Sano, who I'm greatly indebted to, Ms. Kame, who was a colleague of mine. I am full of many, many memories as I sit before you today. I'm sure, however, that the reason that I was invited to speak before you today is because you all want to ask this burning question, which is, why in the world did you go to Crimea, the Crimean Peninsula? So today I would like to speak primarily about this topic, and then also perhaps touch upon some of the things that I tried to accomplish during my years as Prime Minister, also touch upon the Futenma issue. I ask for your indulgence and allow me to please sit for the rest of this speech.
なぜ私がクリミアに参ったのか、その答えを一つ申し上げれば、日本という国を真の意味で独立をした自立した国家にしたいと、その思いからでございます。
In response to this burning question, why did I go to Crimea? The answer is very, very simple. If I summarize my feelings, it is that I have this great wish for Japan to become a truly autonomous, independent nation.
私は総理時代に祖父の頃からロシアとの関係というものが鳩山という家においても重要な位置を占めていたものですから、北方領土問題の解決に向けて少しでも役に立ちたいと、そのように考えておりました。
When I was Prime Minister, or even before that, I have, since my childhood, always had the feeling within our household, beginning with my grandfather's era, of being very, very preoccupied or being very, very concerned about Japan-Russia ties. In particular, when I served as Prime Minister, one of the great goals that I had, desires that I had, wishes that I had, was to somehow bring to a resolution the problem of the northern territories.
当時のメドベージェフ大統領との間に数回会談はいたしましたけれども、北方領土問題の打開に向けた方向性は十分に見出すことができないまま総理を辞めることになりました。
Although while I served as Prime Minister, I did have several opportunities to meet with the President of Russia at the time, Mr. Medvedev. I unfortunately could not come to a conclusion or a resolution of this issue and had to leave the post of the premiership before I could see a final solution.
私はプーチン大統領の時にこの問題を解決させていかなければならないと、そのように強く考えております。
I feel now that we must do everything in our power to try to bring this issue to a resolution during President Putin's presidency.
そして、大変これは良いことに、安倍首相とプーチン大統領は6回も首脳会談を行い、非常に両者の関係は良好だというふうに伺っておりました。
And something that worked very, very fortuitously in this area was the fact that Mr. Putin and Prime Minister Abe had opportunities to meet 6 times, 6 summit meetings, and I had been told that the relationship between the two persons were very, very positive.
したがってこのプーチン大統領と安倍首相との間でいよいよ北方領土問題の解決に向けた議論がスタートするのではないかと、そのように期待もしておりました。
So I was full of great expectations that while Prime Minister Abe was in office, while President Putin was in office, the two would be able to begin actual deliberations and discussions and debates, negotiations to bring this issue to a close.
ところが昨年の冬から春にかけて、いわゆるクリミアの問題が起きて、日本は米国に追随するような形でロシアに対する経済制裁を加えました。
Unfortunately, last year, beginning in the winter and continuing into the spring, we saw the emergence of what we call the Crimean issue or Crimean problem. As a result of this, Japan followed in the footsteps or followed the leadership of the United States and imposed economic sanctions against Russia.
多分私が推察するに、安倍総理あるいは日本政府は本当はあまり経済制裁をやりたくなかったんではないかと思っておりますが、しかしアメリカに強いられる形でお付き合い程度の軽微なものではありましたけれども、制裁を科したわけでございます。
I believe, and this is of course just simply my assumption, I believe that probably Prime Minister Abe and the members of the Japanese government would have preferred not to impose these kinds of economic sanctions. However, because of the strong desire of the United States and because Japan wanted to be able to follow or be compatible to the United States, they did impose economic sanctions on Russia. They are economic sanctions that are fairly light in nature, but they symbolize the desire of the Japanese government to have close ties with the United States.
昨年の秋、モスクワを訪れたときに、ナルイシキン国会議員議長から日本の政治の間違いによって制裁というものが課されて、大変そのことを私たちは遺憾に思うというふうに言われました。
Last fall, I had an opportunity to visit Moscow, and I met with the Speaker of the House, or the Speaker of the Parliament there, and he explained to me that he felt it was highly regrettable that the Japanese government made a mistaken policy decision to impose these economic sanctions.
たとえ軽微なものであっても、ロシア側とすれば、その経済制裁というものを深刻に受け止めたのは無理もありません。結果としてプーチン大統領の来日が今になっても決まらないというそういう状況になりました。
I mentioned earlier that the economic sanctions that were actually imposed on Russia by Japan were fairly light in nature. Even so, the fact that any economic sanctions are imposed on Russia from the Russian point of view is something, of course, that was very treated as very serious or grave problem. As a result of this, even now, the date for President Putin's visit to Japan has not yet been determined.
プーチン大統領が日本に来るということがまだ決まらない状況の中で、北方領土問題の打開に関して真摯な議論ができるはずもありません。
I believe that when we have a situation where the visit of President Putin cannot be decided, visit to Japan cannot even be decided, then given such an environment or given such a background, we cannot have any expectations that progress will be made on resolving the Northern Territories issue.
私はそれは大変にもったいないことだと思っております。
I feel this is a tremendously regrettable, sort of wasteful opportunity, a very sad thing indeed.
したがって私は本当にアメリカの意に従うような形で日本が経済制裁を行うべきであったのか、あるいはこれからも制裁を続けていくべきなのか、そのことをぜひ現地に行って見ていきたいと思ったのでございます。
As a result, I questioned whether the Japanese government truly should have imposed these economic sanctions as a way to express its willingness to follow the will of the United States. I also questioned whether the Japanese government should continue to keep these sanctions in place. As a result, I felt it was very important to visit the area myself and see with my own eyes what the situation was, so that I could more clearly understand whether Japan should be following such policies.
またこの数日前に外国特派員協会に古賀茂明さんが招かれて、メディアと政治、特に政権との在り方について話があったというふうに伺っています。
Separately from this, I have been told that several days ago, Mr. Shigeaki Koga came to speak before you at the FCCJ, and he spoke primarily about the relationship between the media and politics, in particular the media and the current administration.
今回の問題のもう一つのテーマはそこにもあると思っています。
I believe that what I have been discussing about, what I've been telling you about in regard to the Crimean situation, I think this media aspect also plays a part.
この日本の政府あるいは外務省は基本的にアメリカという国の情報というものを基本的にそれが正しいものであるという形で受け入れて、それで日本政府の対応を判断しているように思います。
I believe that it is my impression that the Japanese government and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs fundamentally receive information about the world through the United States, and that the Japanese government and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs take this information from the United States as being fundamentally correct and true. And as a result, they base their policies on this information.
ただ今回のウクライナの問題に関して申し上げると、必ずしもアメリカ側の情報だけがすべてではないように私には思えてなりません。
However, in regard to this particular issue, the issue of what has been happening in the Ukraine, I do believe that perhaps not all of the information surrounding this issue necessarily comes from the United States. In other words, there are other kinds of information available beyond what the United States has provided.
これはウクライナ問題に詳しい知識人の方々からの意見として私が理解をしておりますのは、ウクライナ問題というもののきっかけはやはりアメリカあるいは欧米側がさまざまプーチン大統領がソチのオリンピックである意味で手足が縛られている時にさまざまな画策を行って起こしたものであるというふうに理解をするべきだと思っています。
In regard to the Ukrainian issue, it is a very, very complex issue. My understanding, and this understanding comes from the opinions of many academics and scholars and people who are very, very well versed in these matters. My understanding of the Ukrainian issue is that during the period of the Sochi Olympics, when President Putin was so very, very much involved and busy and preoccupied with the Sochi Olympics, forces in the United States and Europe, basically in the West, took advantage of the fact that Mr. Putin was not able to focus on other matters and basically were responsible for basically creating different maneuvers to create this Ukrainian situation.
特にアメリカといってもアメリカの軍産複合体に支援を受けているネオコンが背後でさまざまな活動をしていたということが明らかになっています。
It has become apparent over time that when I speak about the United States being involved in this kind of activity, I refer not necessarily to the entirety of the United States, but it has recently come to light that the neoconservatives who have the backing of the industrial military complex in the United States, they seem to have been very, very prominently working in the background to this affair.
このヤヌコビッチ政権がそのような方々の手によって非合法に追放されたと、そのように解釈するべきではないかと思います。
I feel that perhaps the most correct interpretation of what happened in the Ukraine was that as a result of the different maneuverings and plans of these groups of people, the president of the Ukraine, Mr. Yanukovych, was higoho, which is illegally basically ousted from his post.
これは見方によって大きく異なることであるわけでありますが、アメリカ側とすれば当然いわゆる市民活動、市民運動の皆さん方が民主化を求めてヤヌコビッチ政権を倒したという見方になります。
Of course, having said this, I understand that there are many different points of view regarding this matter, and perhaps in the United States, the general view is that this was actually a democratic movement, a civil uprising, basically, where the people of the nation ousted Mr. Yanukovych.
これは見方によるものですから、どちらが正しいというふうに一概に申し上げることができないかもしれません。
And as I said earlier, there are many points of view in regard to this matter. It is also a very, very complex issue, so I cannot at this point say one viewpoint is definitely the only viewpoint that is possible, the only correct one.
しかし一方の側だけが正しくて、すなわちオバマが正義でプーチンが常に悪であるというような判断をすることは、これは必ずしも適当ではないと、そのように思っています。
But what I'm saying is that because it is a complex problem and because there are many points of view, I believe that the correct way to proceed is to look at all of these different kinds of points of view and think about them and make one's own decisions. In other words, what I am concerned about is that only one side or one point of view is respected or held as to be true. To be more specific, the fundamental kind of thinking that seems to exist, which is that the Obama administration always stands on the side of justice and is always correct, and Mr. Putin is always the bad person. I believe this kind of thinking is not necessarily the only way to think.
私が申し上げたいことは、このような問題を解く鍵でございまして、例えば市民活動派と治安部隊の双方に多くの死傷者が出た事件がございますが、その時両者側に同じ銃弾で殺されたという事実があります。
What I want to say is that when one looks at a problem of this complex nature, one must try to seek ways to sort of unlock the mysteries or the questions surrounding these issues. And one way to possibly unlock the mysteries surrounding this issue is that we look back on a particular incident that occurred that gained great media attention, which was when there was a clash between the security forces of the government on one side and the civil activists on the other side. And there were many people who were killed on both sides. And when there were inspections done later, it was discovered that the same kind of ammunition, the same ammunition had been used to kill people on both the civil activist side and the government security forces side.
市民活動側、いわゆる民主化を求める側とすれば、当然これはヤヌコビッチ側がやったということで責めているわけでありますが、どうも事実はそうではないということでございます。
In other words, from the people who are standing on the civil activist side, it is only natural that they make the assumption that because they are struggling to gain democracy, obviously the people that shot at their side had to be people who were supporting Yanukovych. In other words, it was the former president who had ordered these kinds of killings. However, as I mentioned earlier, the truth seems to be slightly different.
このヤヌコビッチ政権が追放された後、暫定政権、そしてポロシェンコの政権ができていくわけでありますが、その彼らの政権がウクライナ化というものを強く求めてきているということが騒乱を大きくしたと、そのように思います。
When we see what happens, and after Mr. Yanukovych fled from office after his administration collapsed, we saw the emergence of an interim government, and then we saw the emergence of an administration led by Mr. Poroshenko. But during this time, over the past year or so, we have seen that a kind of Ukrainification has occurred in the country. There are much more feelings of wanting to make the country more Ukrainian as much as possible. And I believe that these kinds of perhaps nationalist feelings have created even greater confusion and strife.
閣僚の中に多くのネオナチの人たちが存在しているという中で、ネオナチスの人たちがいるということも含めて、この新しい政権においてウクライナ語が強要されて、ロシア語というものが公用語から外されるという状況が起きました。
For example, we see that among the ministerial posts in the government, there are persons who can be considered neo-Nazis in their thinking. And in the new administration, we have seen that the official language has become basically Ukrainian. And there is a concerted effort to remove Russian from the language Russian from society.
クリミアは特にロシア系の方が5割を超しております。
However, when we look at Crimea, we see that over 50% of the population are of Russian ethnicity.
もしロシア語が公用語から外されると、そういう人たちがいわゆる公務員で、 重用されると、盗用されていく道が閉ざされるということになります。
If Russian is no longer an official language in this country, it would mean that Russians would basically be barred or would not have an opportunity to enter public service.
そういった人たちの恐怖、新しい政権ができることに対する恐怖ということが彼らを住民投票に導きました。
I believe that the fears of these kinds of people about the intent of the new administration, about what kind of a society would emerge as a result of the new administration, basically led to the holding of the national referendum.
9割を超す方が住民投票においてロシアへの編入を賛成したわけでございます。
As you know, over 90% of the people voted in a national referendum, and the vote was that the people wanted to enter wanted to enter the Russian Federation.
私はその1年後に、すなわち住民投票が行われたほぼ1年後にクリミアを訪れました。
I visited the Crimea in about 1 year after this national referendum had been held.
そこには当然戦車もありませんし、滞在中兵士の姿も一切見ませんでした。
I did not see any tanks while I was there. I did not see any troops that were still stationed there while I was visiting.
当然私がクリミアのすべての現実を見れたわけではありません。
Of course, I understand that during my limited time there, I was not able to see the reality of everything in the Crimea.
しかし、私は2度クリミア連邦大学とそれからセバストポリにありますモスクワ大学の分校で講演をさせていただきましたが、その時集まった多くの若い学生たちの目は大変輝いて非常に朗らかでございました。
However, I did have the opportunity to give two speeches or lectures while I was there. One was at the Crimean Federal University, which is a direct translation, and the other was at the branch school of Moscow University, which was in Sevastopol. I spoke in front of many, many students, and I saw that the eyes of these young people were shining, and the feeling was very, very positive.
私が見る限りにおいて、作られた平和というよりも彼らは本当に現在の状況に満足しているように思いました。
Again, of course, this is my impression, but as far as I was able to tell, it did not seem that their positive or hopeful attitude or peaceful attitude was something that was fabricated, but rather something that was very much true.
したがって私は今彼らが満足をしているということにおいて、その彼らの状況というものが1年間で好転してきているという現実を理解するべきだと思っています。
In other words, I believe that 1 year after the national referendum, I visited and I've seen with my own eyes that the people there seem to be satisfied. And I believe that it is important to give this kind of information to the rest of the world. In other words, the situation there seems to have been changing for the better.
住民投票が9割を超えていたというこの数字そのものが大きな意味を持つとは思っていません。
I spoke earlier about the 90% of the population, national referendum, etc., but I do not necessarily think that the numbers themselves are the most crucial thing.
なぜなら、例えばクリミア・タタール人という少数民族はその選挙の時には、投票の時には55% の投票率だったと言われています。
The reason is that, for example, if we look at one of the minority groups in the Crimea, that is the Tatars, their voter turnout rate was less than 50%.
55%。
It was 55%, excuse me.
55% というのは日本の国政選挙を見るとそんなに低い数字でもないようにも思いますが。
Of course, 55%, when we look at this number from Japanese eyes and we look at Japanese voter turnout rates, 55% does not sound like a small figure at all.
それは冗談としても申し上げたいことは、 そのクリミア・タタール人、当時1年前に必ずしも投票行動に対して好意的でなかった人たちも、1年間の新しい政権の行動によって、現在は 99% の方がロシア人のパスポートを持っていると、7割の方はロシアへの編入にもうすでに賛成をしているということを伺いました。
But on a more serious note, I believe that the Tatars in Crimea who 1 year ago at the time of the national referendum may not necessarily have all been in favor of the vote, I think after 1 year of seeing what the actual new administration has been doing, we see some positive figures. For example, 99% of them have obtained Russian passports. I was told that some 70% of the Tatars now are in favor of Crimea having entered the Russian Federation.
もうクリミアは一言で言うと、19世紀、18世紀の後半からロシアの領土であったということであり、それが再びまたロシアの領土になったということであると私は理解するべきだと思っています。
I believe that the correct interpretation of events is that we must look at the historical aspects of this issue. Crimea, from the latter part of the 18th century, basically belonged. Latter part of the 18th century, it was a part of Russian territory, and now, after many years, it has again become part of Russian territory. I think that is a correct interpretation of events.
したがって、今クリミアがロシアの領土になって平穏を取り戻している中で、西欧、欧米の国々、日本も含めてでありますが、これからも経済制裁を加えるべきかどうかということに関しては、しっかりと慎重に考えるべきだと思っています。
Therefore, as Crimea has reverted back to Russian territory, and as they are working very hard to try to regain peace and stability, I believe that we must think seriously and gravely and carefully about whether at this very important time in Crimean history, whether the West, including of course Japan, should continue to impose these kinds of economic sanctions.
私は2月に行われたいわゆる東ウクライナを中心とする暴動に対する停戦合意というものがミンスクで行われたときに、そのミンスク合意の中にクリミアの文字はどこにもなかったということに注視するべきではないかと思っています。
As you remember, in February, there was an eruption of violence in the eastern part of the Ukraine, and as a result, a ceasefire agreement was arranged in Minsk. When you look at the text of the Minsk ceasefire agreement, Crimea is not mentioned at all, and I think this is a very, very important point to note.
すなわちドイツやフランスから見ると、クリミアの問題というものはもうこれ以上大きな問題にしないと、基本的に解決済みだというふうに思っておられるのではないかと期待しています。
In other words, I have great expectations that the way to interpret this fact is that the nations of Germany and France no longer wish to create this Crimean issue as a bigger issue. They do not want to make it a larger issue. They fundamentally believe, it is my great hope, that they believe that the Crimean issue has been settled.
したがって私はクリミアの問題においてロシアに対する経済制裁を日本が真っ先に解くのが最も適切な処置ではないかと考えています。
As a result, I believe that in regard to the Crimean problem, because of what I've just said, I believe that Japan should take the initiative and very, very quickly lift these economic sanctions against Russia. I believe that is the most appropriate measures to follow.
昨日そのことを議論したときに、元外務官僚でございました東郷和彦さんが 近々、安倍首相がオバマ大統領と会談をするときに、この話をするべきではないかという話をされていました。
Yesterday, I had an opportunity to discuss this issue, and at that time, a former Ministry of Foreign Affairs official, Mr. Kazuhiko Togo, said that he thought that during the upcoming summit meeting between Prime Minister Abe and President Obama, this should be something, should be an issue that should be raised.
彼の主張は、これからもロシアに対する経済制裁を加え続けると、ロシアは急速に中国に接近をすると。で、そのことは決してアメリカにとっても日本にとってもメリットがある話ではないだろうと。
The reason he said this, the fundamental logic behind Mr. Togo's thinking was that if economic sanctions are continued to be placed upon Russia, Russia will very quickly become even closer to China. And this is a situation that would not be beneficial for either the United States or Japan.
私はこのようなことが首脳会談において議論されることを期待をしています。
I therefore have great hopes that this matter will be raised and resolved during the upcoming summit meeting.
安倍、オバマ会談に関してもっと期待することはあるわけでありますが、まずは冒頭、クリミア問題に関してのみお話を申し上げた次第であります。
Having said this, of course, I do have other great expectations about what might happen at the summit meeting between Prime Minister Abe and Mr. Obama. However, I wanted to spend my opening remarks speaking about this particular issue, the Crimean issue.
以上でまず私からの全般のトークを終了させていただきます。ご清聴ありがとうございました。
So thank you for very kind attention.
Okay, well, we'll now enter the Q&A section. I'm happy to say we have 55 minutes to probably take a lot of questions and answers. You'll see that we have the microphone set up over here. And when you're called upon, please identify your name and affiliation, and then ask your questions. And I see Stefano first.
Thank you. My name is Stefano Carrè for the Italian Economic Daily Sole 24 Ore. From the current Japanese government viewpoint, the main motivation probably to impose a sanction against Russia for the Crimean takeover is the fact that it's a changing of the status quo by force, and so implicitly can set a bad example for China. And so don't you see any merit on this line of reasoning that, it's a changing of the status quo by force? And by the way, I understood that you went to China and you stated something that sounds obvious, that the Senkaku Island is there is a fact that there is a dispute, and it should be recognized that there is a dispute to move forward. And this position, some people consider you a kind of heretic or traitors. So can you clarify your position regarding the Senkaku issue or dispute? Thanks.
はい。これで大丈夫ですね。ご質問ありがとうございます。まず申し上げたいのは、先ほども私はこのクリミアの問題と北方領土問題をある意味で絡めてお話を申し上げました。
So thank you very much for your question. I would like to begin by saying that, first of all, I wanted to start off by talking about the Crimean issue and the Northern Territories issues.
この現状を変えることにつながるということで、クリミアをウクライナの領土からロシアの領土に変えるということを行うと、さまざまな日本の周辺における領土問題において不利益が生ずるのではないかというお尋ねだと思います。
My understanding of your question is that this changing of the status quo by the use of force is something that if we accept this kind of interpretation of what Russia did with the Crimea, then that could have negative consequences for Japan's relationship with other countries in the area.
ただこのクリミアに関しては、少なくとも私の理解するところによると、昔はギリシャの植民都市であったり、したわけでございますが、先ほど申し上げたように18世紀の後半からはいわゆるロト戦争、ロシアとトルコのロト戦争以降、ロシアの領土であるということでございます。
As I mentioned earlier in my opening speech, my understanding, to the best of my understanding, the history of Crimea is that, of course, in the ancient past, it was a colony of Greece, but after many, many centuries, since the end of the war between Russia and Turkey, since the late 18th century, Crimea was part of Russia.
そのロシアの領土であったものが、フルシチョフの時代に、書記長の時代に、1954年でございますけれども、これは同じソ連邦の中ではあったわけでありますけれども、クリミアをロシア共和国からウクライナ共和国に移したということで、ウクライナの領土になりました。
However, over time, even though it was part of Russian territory, during the time of Mr. Khrushchev, specifically in 1954, the Crimea was placed under the jurisdiction of a different part of the Soviet Union. It was still part of the Soviet Union, but the Crimean, it was rather than being part of the Russian Republic, it was made part of the Ukrainian Republic.
したがって、その時から、クリミアがウクライナの領土になったわけでありますが、そのフルシチョフの行ったことも、現在は非合法、不法の行為であったというふうにも言われています。
Since that time, as I mentioned earlier, Crimea was part of the territory of the Ukraine. However, it has been said, and it is still being said, that what Mr. Khrushchev did at that time, changing the jurisdiction of this area, was something that was illegal or not correct.
当時のソ連あるいはロシアが必ずしも法治国家であったわけではありませんから、そのことが大きな意義を持つものではないかもしれません。
Some people say that this was what he did was in violation of the laws or legal rules. Having said this, however, at the time, the Soviet Union might not necessarily be considered a nation that was governed by the rule of law. So this observation that this action was not correct probably may not have that much meaning.
ただロシアからウクライナの領土になった以降も、クリミアの方々は多くロシアに戻りたいという希望を持っており、1991年ソ連邦がなくなった時にも住民投票を行いました。
However, even though the Crimea was placed under the jurisdiction of Ukraine rather than under the jurisdiction of Russia, even within the territory of Crimea, many people wanted to still return to Russia. And in fact, in 1991, when the USSR basically dissolved or collapsed, there was a national referendum that was held.
ただその時はその住民投票はロシアには無視されました。
However, the national referendum results were ignored by Russia at that time.
今回は2度目の住民投票ということになります。
So, in other words, this is the second such national referendum that was held.
私は世界には例えばイギリスからのスコットランドの独立の住民投票とか、いわゆる地域の自己決定権というものはかなり重要になってきていると思っています。
I believe that when we look around the world, we see that there are other similar movements where certain territories or areas have desired to gain independence from a larger nation. For example, we see that there's a national referendum, for example, the national referendum in Scotland about gaining independence from the United Kingdom. I think that in the future there will be more regions or more areas of the world where certain peoples want to gain independence and have more autonomy. And decide their own future, excuse me.
領土の主権の問題と地域の自己決定権の問題というのは非常に複雑であることは間違いありません。
And of course, it goes without saying that the idea of territorial sovereignty on the one hand, and the idea of each region being, the people of each region being able to determine their own destiny, these problems are very intertwined and very complex.
しかしこれからの国の在り方ということを考えたときに、圧倒的に多くの人々が、その地域の人々が独立を期待するとか、あるいはどっかの国に編入されることを期待するというような状況が起きたときには、この民主主義というものに基づいて自己決定権というものを認める方向に動くべきではないかと、そう思っています。
However, when we look to the future and we see that we consider what a nation should be, or what the ideal form of a nation should be, then I believe that if you look at a particular region and you see that the majority of people living in that region have a very strong desire to either want independence or to join another country, then based on democratic principles, I believe that we should move in the general direction of respecting the wishes of the people in that region to determine their own destiny.
ただそうなって出てくる問題は、じゃあ北方領土はどうなんだと。今ロシアの人たちが住んでいて、そこで住民投票を行ったらそれを認めるのかという議論があります。
I understand, however, that after making these remarks, I will be countered with the question of what then do you think about the Northern Territories issues? In other words, in this region, many Russian people are living, and so if a national referendum were held, would you honor or would you respect the results of that national referendum?
それは事情が大きく違うと私は理解をしています。すなわち第二次世界大戦後、島に住んでいた日本人がすべて追放されて追い出されて、日本の現在の根室などに多く移らざるを得ないという事情があったからであります。
However, this national referendum or people's referendum idea in the Northern Territories is very different. The situation is very different because the history of the area is different. In other words, immediately following the end of World War II, there were many Japanese who were living on those islands. However, they were forcibly driven away from their homes and driven from the islands. Many had to move, not because they wanted to, but because they were forced to move to Japan. Many still live in the area around Nemuro in northern Hokkaido.
また尖閣諸島の問題は、これは尖閣諸島には現在人が住めるような土地ではありませんから、住民投票で決めるという話は存在しないと思っています。
Also, you mentioned the possibility about the topic of the Senkaku Islands. First of all, in regard to holding a people's referendum, of course, this idea does not apply to the Senkaku Islands because these are islands that are fundamentally not habitable.
尖閣諸島のことに関して持論を申し上げたら相当時間がかかりますが、結論を申し上げれば、私は1972年、田中角栄総理と周恩来首相との間で、これは非公式ではあったかもしれませんが、2人の間で交わされた言葉の中に実質的な領土棚上げということが交わされたというふうに理解をしています。
If I were to speak about my personal views and opinions and thoughts about the Senkaku Islands, I would run out of time today. So I would just like to give my conclusion, or very briefly. My understanding is that in 1972, when the head of Japan, Prime Minister Tanaka of Japan, met with his counterpart of China, Mr. Xu Enlai, although it is said that this was an unofficial conversation that was held, the fundamental understanding is that even though it was unofficial, the two agreed to basically shelve the issue of the Senkaku Islands.
Okay, I saw Martin first.
Martin Kölling with the German financial daily Handelsblatt. You are a proponent of the East Asian community, which means you are in favor of a reconciliation with South Korea and China. Now, of course, we are facing the 70th anniversary of the end of the war, and I would like to know from you how you basically see or rate Prime Minister Abe's attempts in this regard. Is he promoting reconciliation in your point of view, or is he doing the opposite? And what do you think should be done?
このいわゆる戦後70年という節目の年に、安倍首相が談話を考えておられるということでございます。この談話は大変、東アジアの方々に対して結果として緊張感を与えてしまうものになるのではないかと私は心配をしています。
So obviously, the 70th anniversary of the end of World War II, this is a very, very important landmark year, and Prime Minister Abe is apparently thinking of issuing a statement on this occasion. In regard to the statement that he's issuing, I have considerable anxieties that what might increase tensions among the peoples of the East Asian community.
昨日ある会合で村山富一元首相と一緒になりました。
Yesterday, I had the opportunity to be in a venue where I was able to meet Mr. Murayama, one of the former prime ministers.
彼は、すなわち村山元総理は、安倍首相が、村山談話を見直すと言ったり、継承すると言ったり、一部変えると言ったり、しているので、何を考えているのかわからないとおっしゃっていました。
Mr. Murayama said that, of course, he issued a statement on the 50th anniversary of the war, and so in regard to the Murayama statement, Prime Minister Abe has been making many, many remarks about this Murayama statement. He has been saying, for example, that he will continue to follow in the footsteps of this Murayama statement, or that he will review it, or that he might possibly change part of it. So Mr. Murayama basically threw up his hands and said, I don't know what Mr. Abe is planning to do.
最近、安倍首相は、同じことを言うならコピーすればいいだろうというような発言をされています。
Recently, Prime Minister Abe made a comment that if he's simply going to repeat what has been already said before, then you might just simply Xerox or copy the statement.
だとすると、この彼は、例えば植民地支配とか侵略戦争であるということでお詫びをすることに対して心の中では好ましく思っていないという本音が見えていると思います。
Since you look at these statements of Mr. Abe, my fundamental impression is that in regard to the words that were issued in previous statements about Japan recognizing that it had basically colonized, had exerted colonial domination over parts of Asia, that it had engaged in a war of aggression, or that Japan felt heartfelt apologies, sorrow for its role in the war, I believe in regard to these kinds of concepts, Prime Minister Abe, in his heart of hearts, does not view these words favorably.
中国や韓国だけではなく、アメリカや西欧の国々も彼のすなわち安倍総理の本音というものが分かっています。それだけに私はもし、植民地支配あるいは侵略戦争という言葉が隠されてしまうと、これは 大変に大きな問題になると、すなわち言いたくないから別の言葉を使ったということになり、大変な問題を引き起こすことになりますので、私はこの安倍総理の本音が世界の人々に分かっているだけに、しっかりとしたメッセージを、すなわち植民地支配、侵略戦争という言葉を用いて、しっかりとお詫びをする気持ちを心に込めて申す必要があると、そのように思います。
I speak not only of China and South Korea, but also of the United States and other Western nations. I believe that the general understanding among all of these nations is that they understand what is truly in the heart of Prime Minister Abe. They understand his feelings about these matters. And because his fundamental feelings about these matters are so widely known, I think it is especially going to be problematic if he does not use these very crucial words such as colonial domination or war of aggression, etc. in his statement, because it will be taken as a message that he deliberately omitted those words because he did not want to express these words. And as I said earlier, this could become a very, very serious problem indeed. So I repeat again, because everyone truly understands what is in Mr. Abe's heart about these matters, Mr. Abe should take deliberate and extra care to include these words such as colonial domination, war of aggression, and truly from the bottom of his heart express and feel a sense of apology and sorrow and regret about these issues. He should use these words in his statement.
もしそのような明確な言葉をお使いになりたくなければ、70年談話を出されない方がよろしいと思います。
And if, however, Mr. Abe absolutely does not want to use these words in his statement, then he should simply not issue a 70th year anniversary statement at all.
I see Ryusaku Tanaka.
Eh, 私はこの教会の会員で、田中と申します。私昨年、都合2ヶ月、ウクライナにいて、クリミアがロシアに編入される過程の一部始終を見てきました。マイダンのクーデターに深く関与しているアメリカ大使館、大使らが出席する、集まりにも出ました。で、その実態は、マスコミが伝えるウクライナ報道とは180度違っていました。それはもう鳩山さんが指摘する通りです。
So, I'm a member of the club. My name is Tanaka. Last year, I had an opportunity to spend about 2 months in the Ukraine, and I saw what happened with the Crimea becoming part of the Russian Federation. I saw it all from the beginning to the end. I was even able to attend a gathering where the ambassador and members of the U.S. Embassy there, who were said to be very closely involved with the Maidan movement, the Euromaidan movement, gathered. I was in one of those gatherings. And what I'm saying is that what I saw there was 180 degrees different from what was being reported in Japan. In other words, I agree with what you're saying.
ここから質問です。ウクライナ問題の真相を今のように告発し続ければ、鳩山さんは再びアメリカに葬られることになると思うのですが、本気で戦うおつもりはありますでしょうか。
My question is that if you continue to express your ideas about the Ukrainian issue as you have been doing today, then in other words, if you continue to pursue the truth of the matter in this way and to and publicly share your results with us, I think you will again gain the great displeasure of the United States. Are you prepared for that?
一度葬られた人間が二度葬られることは全く構いません。
The word that is being used is homoru, which is sort of to be buried by the United States. But I've already experienced that once, so having that happen to me again twice is no problem.
ただぜひ田中さんと一緒に戦いましょう。
But Mr. Tanaka, I would like to link with you and work together on this issue. Fight together with you on this issue.
I see Joel.
日 Joël Legendre from RTL France, TV and radio journalist. I think early this year you played in a show in Bunkamura, in a theater called West Side Story. And you appear as a woman, I think having the name of Rosario, who was the name of a former wife of a former US president. I mean, that's quite something as a former prime minister to appear on a show like this. And I would like to ask you your view as a politician. Today, you know, if you look back at what you've done in 2009 when you were elected, would you restate the same things you did about Okinawa in the same way? Or would you try to stay longer in power and try to enter into a policy of negotiation with the US on some issues like Okinawa? In other words, what you've done in the past, do you stick to it today again, or would you have done things differently? Thank you.
沖縄問題ですね。
そうですね、女装されたということ、についてでもありますが、基本的にはもしその過去を振り返ってみますと、総理大臣を務めたときに、沖縄問題とかいろいろありましたのでございますが、やっぱり振り返ってみますと、同じことを今でもしてたと思いますでしょうか。それとももうちょっとその政権に残って、首相として責務を果たしまして、もっとその米国とその沖縄問題について交渉をし続けようと思いますでしょうか。もしやり直すことができたらということですが。
私の女装をぜひ皆さんには見ていただきたかったと思っておりますが、人間、変わるものだと思ってまして、私をメイクして、くださった女性から、これであなたの新しい人生が始まりますねというふうに言われましたが、必ずしも新しい人生が始まるとは思いません。
I really would have loved to have shown you my appearance dressed up as a woman. The person I was thinking how extraordinary it is when one lives one's life that people undergo many, many different kinds of changes. The lady who was putting on makeup for me said, "Today you are starting a new chapter in your life." However, I realized after a while that things are not so simple. My life is not fundamentally changed after all.
その変わっていないのは私が辞めるきっかけになりました。沖縄の普天間基地の返還問題にいまだに関わっていることにも表れています。
In other words, in regard to your question about Okinawa, if I would do things differently, I said people fundamentally do not change, and my fundamental stance regarding Okinawa, in other words, my stance which basically led to my resignation about my thoughts about the future of Futenma Air Base, I still am involved in this issue. My fundamental feelings about this matter have not changed.
私はもはや政治家ではありませんけれども、東アジア共同体というものを構想していく人間として、沖縄を軍事の要石から平和の要石にしていきたいと、そう強く願っています。
I am no longer a politician. However, I am a person who is very deeply involved in trying to help create a strong East Asian community. And as such a person with such ideals and hopes, I feel very, very strongly that Okinawa should not be the cornerstone of military activities, but a cornerstone of peaceful activities.
そう考えますと、この私は辺野古に何度もその後も訪れましたけれども、世界の中でも大変美しい海を基地にしたくないという気持ちは総理の時以上に大変強くよみがえってきています。
In that sense, I have visited Henoko many times, even after I have left the prime ministership, and I still believe that it is one of the most beautiful coastlines, one of the most beautiful areas of ocean in the world. And in fact, my feelings about not wanting to see this become a military base has become even stronger since I have stopped being prime minister.
変化が起きているのはむしろアメリカの方ではないかと期待をしています。
In fact, I have great expectations that what is changing is not myself, but actually the position of the United States.
すなわち海兵隊というものの存在意義というものが今一度見直されてきているというのが一つあると思います。
In other words, I believe that there is a thinking going on in the United States about re-evaluating the raison d'être, the reason for existence of the Marine Corps itself.
あとアメリカと中国あるいはアメリカと北朝鮮の関係にもこれは表ではなかなか 見えませんが、変化が起きていると理解をしています。
I also believe that in regard to the relationship between China and the United States, the relationship between North Korea and the United States, although on the surface it seems as though nothing is changing, I think beneath the surface there are changes taking place.
すなわち中国はもう世界の最大の市場になりつつあります。
In other words, it goes without saying, as many of you know, that China is rapidly becoming the largest market in the world.
そのような中国と実質的にはいかに協力をしていくかということが、私はアメリカにとっても極めて大きな課題になってきていると思います。
As a result, I believe that the issue of how to substantially have good relationships or have cooperative relationships with China is becoming a very, very important issue being discussed in the United States.
したがって辺野古に固執していたらいつまでたっても基地はできないと、ならば普天間を閉じた後、その普天間の代替の基地を作る必要があるのかないのかというところから含めて、そして作るのであるならばどこに作るのかということをアメリカとワシントン、すなわちワシントンと東京、日本政府だけではなくて、沖縄と例えばガムなども含めて議論する場を作ることが求められているのではないかと思っています。
As a result, the idea that by clinging to the idea of this Henoko building is something that maybe is not productive is what the United States is beginning to think. In other words, that if they cling to this idea of this Henoko idea, then no base may eventually ever be built. So rather than cling to this idea, there are many, many other things that are being considered after Futenma is closed. There are some fundamental issues that are being discussed. In other words, is there truly even an alternative need for another base after Futenma closes? And if, however, the answer is yes, then where might that place be? Until now, discussions have been held between the United States or Washington and Tokyo, the Japanese government. But I think that what is needed now is to create a venue or a place or an organization or an opportunity where other parties can also participate in the discussion, such as people from Okinawa and Guam.
安倍首相がオバマ大統領と会談をするときに、ぜひ沖縄の事情をお話をいただき、実質沖縄辺野古では無理だということも本来ならば伝えていただきたいと思っております。
When Mr. Abe and Mr. Obama have their meeting, I would hope very, very much that Prime Minister Abe explain the true situation, the difficult situation that we are facing in Okinawa, and that from a realistic point of view, Henoko is simply not a viable option. That is what I would hope and very much wish that Prime Minister will explain.
尾長知事も訪米されると伺っておりますし、ワシントンに沖縄の事務所が構えられておりますので、その事務所が大きな役割を演じる可能性も出てきているのではないかと私は思っています。
I've also heard that Governor Onaga is planning to visit the United States himself, and I've also heard that there is an Okinawa office now that has been opened in Washington, and there is a great possibility that this Okinawa office will play a very important role in the future on this issue.
Anthony.
Anthony Rowley, Singapore Business Times. I'd like to ask you a question about the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank and Japan's refusal so far to join it. I think there's been an awful lot of publicity about the controversy on this bank, but many people have missed the point, I think, that one of the prime aims of the bank is to create a land bridge between Northeast Asia and Europe via Central Asia. And the AIIB will work with the Russian-led Central Asian Development Bank in Kazakhstan to this end. Do you think Japan, I mean, this will have enormous implications for Japan, for the rest of Northeast Asia. Do you think Japan is missing the point as far as this bank is concerned and its implications for the region?
AIIB に関しては、私、昨年の段階から中国の方々との関わりの中で、私は日本が当初から AIIB に参加をすべきだと考えていました。
In regard to the establishment of the AIIB from last year, in my various meetings and relationships or dealings with various persons from China, I had come to the conclusion quite early that Japan should from the very beginning be involved in the establishment of the bank.
この AIIB の構想というものは、なんか日本には唐突に出てきたように思われますが、決してそうではなく、中国を中心としてかなり長い年月をかけて練ってできたものだとそのように理解をしています。
I believe that many people in Japan have the impression that the idea or the concept of the AIB suddenly appeared from nowhere. However, I believe that this does not reflect the truth, that in fact China basically has made many efforts over many months and many years to try to slowly develop this idea.
東南アジアだけを考えても、例えば道路やパイプラインなどの建設が急がれておりますし、それには多額の投資が必要になっています。
If we look just at Southeast Asia, for example, we see that there's a huge need for the construction of new roads, new pipelines, and as a result, there's a great deal of investment that is necessary as well.
最近、習近平国家主席が話されているように、陸上におけるシルクロードという構想がございます。この構想で、アジア、ユーラシア大陸というものが横断するようなさまざまなインフラが必要になってくるということでございます。
And Mr. President Xi Jinping has recently talked about the idea of creating this land bridge or land road. Basically, it's a Silk Road concept. As a result of this Silk Road concept being realized, the Eurasian continent will suddenly have a tremendous and urgent need for new infrastructure.
私は中国脅威論というものを唱えていると、なかなか AIIB に最初から参加するという機会が生まれなかったとも思いますし、またアメリカとの協力の下で AIIB に加われないという状況もあったと思いますが、日本が特にアジアの新興国の発展、特にインフラによる発展に寄与するために中国と日本が協力をするという姿を見せることがどんなにかこのアジアのみならず世界の人々に安心を与えるかということを考えておりました。
Of course, I understood very well that as long as there remained a great strong feelings in Japan about viewing China as a great threat. I knew that as long as these feelings remained strong in China, that it would be very difficult for voices to be raised that would promote Japan joining the AIIB. And I also understood, of course, that because of Japan's cooperative relationship with the United States, it was difficult for Japan to make the decision to join the AIIB. Having said this, however, when we look at Japan and when we look at the broader area in which it exists, Asia, and we see that there is going to be again this huge need for new infrastructure to be built. If Japan and China could show the world and the people of Asia and the world that they could cooperate in bringing about this kind of new infrastructure and new progress, then I think the people of Asia and people of the world would feel very reassured.
そしてさらに日本が AIIB に参加することが中国を非常に喜ばせるわけでありますから、中国が喜ぶことによって日本と中国との間の政治的な停滞というものを大きく展開できるきっかけになったのではないかとそう思っています。
I also think that if Japan were to join the AIIB, then I think that would have been something that would be something that would have brought great joy to China. And if China rejoiced in this decision, then China-Japan relationships, especially the political relationship, which has remained stagnant for some years, would have been able to be changed in a very drastic way. In other words, it could still be a great opportunity.
I have a question for you. You mentioned in your opening speech the term military-industrial complex in relation to the United States. It's not a term we usually hear from former Japanese prime ministers in relation to the United States. As you know, next week, the Prime Minister Abe will be traveling to Washington, and he'll have an unprecedented appearance before a joint session of the U.S. Congress, an honor which has never been given to a Japanese prime minister before. And during your premiership, most of the U.S. policy was attacking you over your Okinawa policy and Hinoko base. Should we interpret that as being that the United States was unhappy with you because you were annoying the military-industrial complex with your own policies, whereas they give this great honor to Prime Minister Abe because his policies are very much in line with what they want to see him do?
私が直接的に、アメリカから何らかの厳しい非難を浴びたということではありません。
I have not directly ever received any severe criticism directly from the United States.
したがって軍産複合体から何らかあったということもありません。
And I have not received any kind of sort of attack or criticism from the military-industrial complex in the United States either.
ただ私が受けたのは、いわゆる政権交代をしたことによって、政策というものが変わる自由度がもっと広がっていたと考えたんですが、現実は特に普天間の辺野古移転の問題に関しては、私どもの外務省あるいは防衛省の官僚たちが私の考え方よりもアメリカとの間で出来上がった考え方をそのまま支持していたということでございます。
However, what I faced was the fact that because of the change in administration that had occurred with the Democratic Party coming into power, I had thought that there would be a change in the Japanese government. I thought that the freedom that the Japanese government would have in terms of changing policies or determining new policies, the degree of freedom would be greatly increased as a result of this change in administration. However, the reality was that when we look at, for example, the relocation of the Futenma Air Base, I realized that our own, the Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Japanese Ministry of Defense, the bureaucrats there, instead of supporting my views on this idea, rather stuck to the ideas that had been developed between themselves and their counterparts in the United States for many, many years. They put more emphasis on that kind of thinking.
それはご承知のウィキリークスでも明らかになっているように、現在はトップに上り詰めておられるような官僚の皆さん方が、当時鳩山政権に対しては否定的で、アメリカに対して妥協するなというようなメッセージを送り続けていたということでも明らかだと思います。
And I believe that this is not something that I'm just saying from my own experience, but actually there have been many documents that have been released as a result of WikiLeaks. And so what I'm saying has become actually proved. In fact, there are some officials that are now serving in top posts in the United States. And at the time of my administration, they were very, very critical of my attempts and efforts. And they basically pushed that for absolutely no compromise. In other words, there was no willingness to try to accept my ideas.
To the interpreter, I think it was Japanese officials who were telling the U.S. not to compromise.
そうなんですか。日本の官僚がアメリカの方たちに妥協するなと否定的であったということですか、山さん。ちょっと強く勘違いしたのかもしれませんが。
日本の官僚がそうです。妥協するなと、このアメリカの政府に対して、例えば普天間の問題なので、鳩山に対して妥協するなと。
So yes, you're absolutely right. Excuse me, the interpreter misunderstood. Japanese bureaucrats were telling their counterparts in the United States not to compromise, not to accept, not to cave in to Mr. Hatoyama's demands or requests.
私自身はアメリカに、留学していた経験もあり、アメリカという国は大好きな国であります。ただそのことと だからアメリカの意に常に沿うような外交姿勢を取らなければならないかということはまた別の問題だと考えています。
I would also like to clarify, I myself spent many years as a student in the United States. I love this nation. I think it is a wonderful country. But those feelings that I have, positive feelings about the United States, and the work that I have as a Japanese politician, in other words, that just because I personally like the country, I have to always follow the will of the United States. Following that kind of a diplomatic stance, I think those are two separate issues.
Siegfried Gill, freelancer from Germany. I'm writing for an Austrian newspaper a story about the relation between the Coudenhove-Kalergi family and Japan. So I want to ask you, how are related your philosophy or your thinking about East Asian community to the Coudenhove-Kalergi political thinking and to the thinking of the Kachima Peace Institute, because Mr. Kachima was very a close friend to Richard Coudenhove-Kalergi.
はい、私の東アジア共同体という構想はクデンホフ・カレルギー博の友愛精神によるパンヨーロッパ主義に非常に影響を受けています。
The East Asian community concept that I am so in favor of seeing realized is basically based on the idea of UI, which directly translated would be brotherly love or friendship or feelings of fraternity. Similar feelings which were espoused by the gentleman who you mentioned, who the interpreter's name cannot pronounce, who espoused the idea of a pan-European concept.
このクデンホフ・カレルギー博の時代はご承知の通り、スターリンとヒトラーの全体主義が吹き荒れるヨーロッパでありました。
Of course, the era in which this gentleman lived was the era when people such as Stalin and Hitler were basically pushing forward the idea of zentai shugi, which would be totalitarianism.
その全体主義に戦うための思想として、友愛というものが大変重要であるということで、友愛はある意味での革命思想として世に出たと理解しています。
I believe that in order to fight this move toward totalitarianism, another idea was necessary, and this is where this UI, or this fraternity of friendship idea came into existence. It was basically a kind of revolutionary concept.
自由というものは大変尊いけれども、自由が行き過ぎると弱肉強食の社会になり、また平等も大変重要な概念だけれども、平等というものが行き過ぎると非常にやる気のないというか、みんなが平等になる悪平等と言われるような社会に陥ってしまうということを彼は主張し、その自由と平等という2つの大変重要な考え方をつなぐ架け橋として友愛を提唱いたしました。
In other words, the thinking that he had at the time was that there were two wonderful concepts that existed in the world. One was the idea of freedom. Freedom, of course, is a great and honorable and valued concept. However, if one goes too far with allowing freedoms, when there are no controls, you become basically a society where there's the law of the jungle, the strong prey upon the weak. Also, in a similar way, equality, the idea is a very, very important one. But if you go too far with that concept, you create a society where no one makes any efforts. it's a kind of bad equality where, in other words, if people are all the same, then why make any efforts to do any better than anyone else? So he emphasized the fact that these two concepts, freedom and equality, were very, very important, but the way that one should move forward is to link these two ideas, and the way he wanted to link these ideas, the bridge between these ideas was this UI, or fraternity, brotherhood concept.
人間と人間のつながりというもの、絆というものの重要性を認識していく中で、パンヨーロッパ主義を唱え、それが後に EU という形に結実をいたしました。同じことが私は東アジアでも必ずできるとそう思っています。
In other words, he fundamentally valued people-to-people human ties between persons. He thought this was a fundamentally important concept, and as it's developed over time, this became the pan-European concept, which eventually became realized, became the foundation of the EU. And I am hoping, and I believe very strongly, that a similar effort can be done in East Asia as well.
EU に比べてすみません、東アジアは国の格差が経済的な格差も大きいし、また民族も多様で、宗教も多様で、なかなかまとまりがつかないのではないかと批判的な方も多いです。
I understand that there are many people who are critical of these ideas that I've just expressed. They say that in comparison to the EU, when we look at East Asia, the disparities that exist, the differences that exist between countries is enormous. There is, for example, wealth disparity. There are also many, many different kinds of ethnic groups, races that live here. There are many different religions that exist in this area. So bringing them all together into one group would be very, very difficult.
ただ日本や中国にはいわゆる和をもって尊しとなすという発想がございます。
However, there is in both Japan and China this fundamental concept that by bringing harmony, you are able to link people.
そういう発想の下で、むしろ東アジアこそ友愛の思想が定着をして共同体というものを生む素地があると、そのように思っています。
In other words, there is fundamental respect for the idea of harmonious coexistence in this part of Asia. As a result, I believe that an East Asian community can be realized, and I think it will be an area where this idea of UI that I'm promoting so strongly will eventually set down deep roots.
その辺のことに関して、この東アジア、なぜ東アジア共同体なのかと、この本に書かれておりますのでご覧になっていただければと思います。
And in regard to your question about why I believe so strongly in the possibility and the benefits of having this East Asian community, I've explained that in a great deal in my new book.
Teddy Jimbo.
Thank you. I'm going to ask questions in Japanese.
Please identify yourself.
Sorry. ビデオニュースの神保と言います。鳩山さん、先ほどのですね、クリミアの話も鳩山さんが言っていること自体は分かるが、しかし元総理がそれをやっちゃまずいだろうという意見が一部であるようでございます。そこで鳩山さんにお伺いしたいんですけれども、元総理という、ポジションの役割というものを鳩山さんどのように考えておられるか、その元総理の立場で日本政府の政策と違うことをですね、特に対外的なものをやると間違ったメッセージを、対外的に発するのではないかという指摘がある一方で、小泉さんのようなケースもありますし、あるいはカーターさんのようなケースもありますので、鳩山さん、元総理というポジションの、役割責任についてどうお考えになっているか教えてください。
So I've listened to what you've said about the Crimea issue, and I understand what you're saying, but it is also true that there is a section of society that criticizes you by saying that although what you are doing might be right, for a former prime minister to take part in these kinds of activities, is that truly correct? So my question is, what do you view your role as a former prime minister? In other words, some people say that if a former prime minister, the former head of the country, takes actions and expresses opinions that are different from what the current administration or the Japanese government is saying or doing, it might, especially overseas, it might send a different message from what the current Japanese government is trying to do. However, we have seen that other former heads of state, state leaders have moved on their own. For example, Prime Minister Koizumi, former President Carter. So, how do you view the role of a former Prime Minister?
私は昔あるフォーマープライムミニスターと名刺交換をしたときに、その名刺に元総理大臣って書いてございましたが、私はそのような名刺は持ち合わせておりません。
In the past, I had an opportunity to meet with a former prime minister, and when we exchanged name cards, on his name card, he had as his title, former prime minister. However, I have no such words on my name card.
冗談はともかくとして、私は元総理大臣として、やるべきことはやはりあると、そのように考えています。
But on a more serious note, I believe that there are things that a former prime minister should do.
例えばカーター元大統領は大統領時代にどのように評価をされたかは別として、大統領を終えられた後、さまざまな地域に、例えば国交のない北朝鮮などにも行かれて、北朝鮮と米国との間の関係改善のために役割を果たしてこられました。
For example, Mr. Carter, who you just mentioned, putting aside how his presidency was evaluated or regarded, after he left the presidency, he visited many different places in the world. He visited, for example, North Korea at a time when there were no diplomatic relations between the United States and North Korea, and he worked and contributed toward improving the relationship between these two countries.
私は政府の立場を真っ向から否定するつもりはありません。
It is not my intention to directly or confront face on or directly deny face on or oppose face on what the Japanese government is trying to do.
ただ、現在の政府ではなかなかできないことというものをやれる可能性が民間外交としてはあると思っています。
However, I believe that there is an area of diplomacy called private diplomacy or private people's diplomacy, not official diplomacy. There are things that the government cannot do that we who are outside of the government can do.
例えば私が数年前にイランに参った時も大変豪々たる非難を受けました。
I think many of you may recall that several years ago I visited Iran, and then at that time I also again was subjected to a great deal of criticism.
ただその時に私がイランのアフマディネジャード大統領などに申し上げたのは、日本を見習ってほしいということでございました。
However, I had an opportunity to meet many people in Iran at that time, including the president of that time, and I told him, please try to learn from the lessons of Japan.
すなわち、この日本はまだ世界から疑われていた時に、原子力は決して原爆を作るためではなくて、原子力発電、すなわち平和利用に徹するんだということを認めてもらうために、非常に辛抱強く努力をいたしました。
In other words, I explained to him that Japan had a history after the end of the war where Japan was viewed still with a great deal of suspicion, and as Japan moved forward with its own nuclear policy, it had to work very hard and spend a great deal of time and effort to convince the world that it only wanted to pursue nuclear energy not for peaceful purposes, not for military purposes.
当時 P5+1 の議論が行われていたわけでありますが、大統領にぜひ辛抱してもらいたいと、すぐに進展するとは限らないけれども、しかしそれで中断をしないでしっかりと進めてもらいたいということを申し上げました。
There were many discussions and negotiations going on at that time, but I told the president to please try to be patient, that things do not change immediately very quickly, but please to hang on and not give up and not stop the negotiations.
その後、イランもかなり辛抱強くディスカッションを行って、ようやく イランとアメリカとの間で合意が事実上できてきたというところまで参りました。良かったと思っています。
And as a result, in the following years, Iran did continue to pursue its negotiations with great patience. And as a result, we have basically seen the emergence of a de facto agreement between Iran and the United States on this issue. And I think this is a very positive thing indeed.
おかげさまで元総理ということであるだけに、それぞれ外国に伺ってもそれなりの指導者の方々に面談することが可能であります。
What I'm saying is that because of my position as the former Prime Minister, just because I do have this title, I am able to go to visit various countries and meet with very important leaders in that nation.
そういった方々にお会いをして、世界の平和に向けて日本が果たすべき役割を現在の政府でなかなか言えないこと、できないことをやることが元総理としての責務ではないかと思っています。
In other words, when I meet these different leaders, I am able to express Japan's fundamental intent, which is to try to contribute toward gaining more peace in the world. In other words, I also talk about the role Japan should play in contributing to more peace in the world. In other words, I think there are things that, as a person outside of the government, but as a former prime minister, I can do and say things that the Japanese government cannot do and cannot say. I think, in fact, this is one of my great responsibilities as a former prime minister.
最後に、今回私がクリミアに行ったことに対して、ひょっとして、安倍総理に指示をされて行ったのではないかというような思いを持った方も何人かおられました。決してそうではなかったのでありますが、そのように感じた方もおられたようでございます。
I would also like to make one comment, which is that in regard to my visit to Crimea, there have been some people who have speculated that perhaps I was secretly instructed or asked by Prime Minister Abe to visit. I would like to say very clearly here that there was no such instruction or no such guidance.
Okay, well, regrettably that we have come to the end of our time here. So first of all, let's give a warm thank you to, not to the former Prime Minister, but to the President of the East Asian Community Institute.
Thank you.
And hopefully we'll get a chance to talk to him more, because he has just earned himself a one-year honorary membership to the Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan, and we very much hope that he takes advantage of the opportunity to come here from time to time. And I have a final bit of good news. In the spirit of UI, he is not going to immediately rush out the door. He will exchange meishi for those journalists and others who want to keep in contact with the President of the East Asian Community Institute. Thank you very much.